Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to show you guys how to draft a corset with yoke. So I'm just marking out my parameters. I'm marking out a straight line at the side and at the top of the brown paper before I start working. So I actually have a video uploaded on how to draft a Victorian corset and how to draft a corset with shoulder cut together. So if you're interested in that, just check my channel and you'll see the video, and it's also linked in the description. So first thing I want to do is mark out all of my measurements. So I'm marking out my bust point, my under bust point, my half length, and my blouse length. So after doing that, I'm going to mark it out and just draw a straight line from all of that point. Next thing I'm going to do is take out my neck line, which is 3 by 3. That's the standard measurement for the front. So I'm just going to mark 3 inches on both sides and use my curve ruler to connect that together. Then I'm going to take my shoulder measurements. My shoulder measurements is 7.5, which is 15 divided by 2, and then I'm going to go down by 1 inch from that point, which is my shoulder slope. Then mark out my armhole. My armhole measurements is 7.5 inches, which I derive by dividing my bust measurements into 6 and adding 1.5 inches to it. So that's 35 divided by 6 plus 1.5, giving me 7.5 inches. So after I've done that, I'm going to mark out my bust span. My bust span is 7. That's my nipple to nipple measurement. 7 divided by 2, giving me 3.5. And I'm just going to mark that out and draw a straight line. This is just me labeling everything out. My chest line, my bust points, my under bust, half length, and blouse length. So after I've done that, it's time to mark out my armhole. I'm going to divide my armhole measurement into 2 and then go in by 1/2 inch from that point and just draw the armhole curve like you can see me doing on the screen. So now what I'm doing is taking my suppression at the under bust. For this, I'm using 1.5 inches. So I'm marking 0.75 on both sides. Then I'm going to go up from my bust point by 1/2 inch and go down from my bust point by 1 inch. So first I'm going to mark a straight line from that under bust down to my blouse length. Then use my curve ruler to connect that point all the way to the 1 inch which I marked below the bust point. So after doing that, I'm going to divide my shoulder measurements into 2, and from that point, draw a straight line direct to my bust point. What I want to do now is raise my chest line. So I'm raising my chest line up by 1/2 inch. I'm doing this just so my corset cup will have more coverage, although this is totally optional. So after going up by 1/2 inch, I'm just going to mark a straight line from there, and it is from that point that I'm now going to take my suppression. So whatever I have at my under bust is what I'm going to take at my new chest line, or you can also call it your neckline. So I'm using the 3/2 method for this, like I always do. So I'm going to take 1/2 inch for the point going towards the center front and 1 inch for the point going towards the side. Then I'm now going to increase both sides again by 0.25 inches. This is to prevent gaping, very important. Now that that is done, I'm going to go in from the chest line, the original chest line, by 1/2 inch, not the new chest line that I just drew out. So I'm using that point as where my curve for the chest line will start from. Before I do that, I want to work on the side first. So that my armhole point that you can see, I'm going to divide this into 2 and then go down from that point by 1/2 inch. That point which I have gotten is what I'm going to connect to the cup. I don't know if you guys really understand what I'm trying to say, but just make sure that you watch exactly what I am doing. So that my armhole point, I divide it into 2, go down by 1/2 inch from there, and then connect the cup just like this. After doing that, what I'm going to do now is mark out the yoke. So you know the yoke is always like smooth and just well shaped, so you have to make sure that you mark this out before making any more adjustments. So I'm just going to use my curved ruler to draw out my yoke, just like you can see me doing on the screen. So just like that, the yoke is set. Although I ended up going down by half of an inch, but I'll just show that part later. So after I've done that, I now marked out my cup. So it's very important that you make this cup in a U form, like half of a U, so that you have enough space for your boobs to stay in. Because if you place the curve in a wrong way, then your cup is not going to come out well. You'll not be wondering why the cup is small. You used your measurement, but the cup is small. It's because you did not place your ruler properly. So make sure that you place it properly, like you want to draw half of a U, like you can see me doing on the screen. And just like that, corset cup is ready, the yoke is ready. So now I'm just going to mark out my normal body measurement. I'm taking my waist measurements and replacing the dart intake of 1.5 inch, which I took earlier, and then I'm going to mark out 1.5 inches as my sewing allowance. Then for my bust measurements, whatever I have as my bust measurement is what is going to be for my chest line. But now what I'm going to modify at the chest line is that I'm going to replace that dart intake that I took at the chest line. I'm going to replace that. So after replacing it, then I will now mark my 1.5 inch sewing allowance. So for my blouse length, I'm actually using my hip measurements. That's 40 divided by 410, and then I'm marking out 1.5 inch as my sewing allowance. Then I'm just going to connect everything together. For these hip measurements at the blouse length, what I should have done is take my full blouse length measurements and then mark it out. Then connect it from that blouse length measurement to my half length. That would have been more accurate. As you can see, this one is a bit too sharp, but I made the correction when I was drafting the back pattern, so just stay tuned for that. So now that I'm done with everything, I'm just going to cut it out. And this is the yoke for the front pattern. Just add half of an inch in all these areas when cutting. Before we continue cutting, I want you guys to notice that one part of the cup is going to be longer than the other if you measure the curve. So I'm just going to measure the curve for the side going towards the center front, which is 6, and then the side going towards the side is 7. So as you can see, it's 1 inch short. So we have to replace that deficit. So to correct that deficit, I'm just going to attach another piece of paper to the cup, and then I'm going to extend the cup towards the center front by that 1 inch. Now I'm just going to cut everything out and then work on my back pattern. After cutting out all of the patterns, make sure that you label the cups so that you won't misplace them when sewing or mix it up. So that's everything for the front pattern. Now I want to work on the back pattern. So I'm going to first of all mark out my bust points, my half length and my blouse length. Then I'm also marking 1 inch for my zip allowance before I start taking all of my body measurements. So here I'm just drawing a straight line from all of that points and labeling everything out so you guys will understand. This is basically just me drafting a basic bodice block. So I'm basically repeating what I did when I was drafting the front pattern. After I finished with that, I took in my dart allowance of 0.5 inches on both sides from the bust band line and connected this to the chest line. So for the dart and the hemline, I didn't take half of an inch. I just went in by 0.25 inches on both sides and connected all of that together. Before cutting out my yoke, I went down from the chest line by half of an inch and drew a straight line from there. After drawing that straight line, I went down again from that point by half of an inch and connected it to the line that I drew below the chest line. So that's it for the yoke for the back pattern. This is actually just doing basic bodice block measurements. So for the back of a corset, it's not usually that complicated unless if you're doing a particular style. So after doing all of that, I just took all of my body measurements. You'll notice that for this back pattern, if I take my hip measurements on the blouse length, it's not going to come out well because the blouse length is very close to the half length. So what I did was that I just measured where my normal blouse length would stop and then measured my hip measurement from that point, and then just connected the ruler from my half length to that point to know the measurements to use for my blouse length. So I'll actually be stopping at the blouse length and not at that other line which I drew below the pattern. At this point, I'm just taking all of my body measurements and connecting everything together. This is, of course, including the 1.5 inch sewing allowance. Remember, whatever is at the bust point is what is going to be at the chest line. So I just took everything and marked it out. So guys, at this point I'm done with the entire pattern for both the front and the back. This is just me cutting everything out. I've already separated the yoke and I'm just cutting the other part for this corset. So if you want to make this a corset with loop, you can go in by 2 inches, 1.5 inch or just 1 inch and then fold it in to create room for the loop. But I'm not going to be cutting that out in this video. So if you're going to do that, you're not going to cut the yoke to be equal to what you cut out from the bodice. You're only going to remove the zipper allowance and then you can place your ruler like this to cut out the yoke. That's if you don't want it to be fully covered, so that you can place just one button on it and it will look like this when you are done sewing. So whatever modification I'll be making in this corset, I'll be making that in the next video, which will be on how to sew a nude corset pattern with yoke and modesty panel. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.